When a property is vacant, we like to lay eyes on it every so often. It's just routine, especially depending on the location. In our market, you want to make sure that there's nothing going on that's bad. Squatters. I once had a cat that had actually broken into a vacant unit, was living in it down in the basement. So that's what I was doing one day when I came to check on one of our vacant properties. Everything was fine on the first level, so I started walking downstairs to the basement, and as I stepped off the stairwell, I slipped. I lost my balance and hit the floor and landed flat on my back. I felt moisture start soaking into my clothes and on all sides of me. And if that wasn't bad enough, suddenly the smell that hit me was rotten, putrid. I realized that it was sewage. I was laying in sewage. Let me back up. We just finished renovation on an older duplex, 2 units total, one upstairs, one downstairs. The upstairs tenant had moved in maybe a week prior to this event, and the downstairs unit was still vacant. We were looking for a tenant. The rehab had gone well, and we were feeling pretty good about the property. We'd done our walkthrough, ran water in both units, everything was draining properly, checked the electrical. There were no problems that we could really find within the property. We're a little over budget, but everything seems to be these days. We listed the units for rent. The second floor unit rented almost right away, and it was the first floor unit, like I said, that had remained vacant. But we went ahead and moved the people in upstairs and kept looking for a tenant for the first floor. We wanted to make sure that we at least were getting some money in to help cover the mortgage while we were looking for the other tenant. Everything seemed like it was going just fine until that day that I landed on my back and realized I was laying in sewage. And I want to be clear about what this moment was like. This was not a puddle. This was not a little bit of water that was on the floor that something had spilled. This is a 650 square foot basement with 2 to 3 inches of water covering the whole space. It reeked. I didn't immediately know what was going on when I was laying there trying to process, but I was laying in the rotted material that had sort of drained from the sewer pipes onto that floor and had just been sitting there for who knows how long. It's the type of thing where when it happens, you just want to go take a shower. You want to be done with the day. You're like, look, I want to mulligan on this day and just be at home and be done with the whole situation. But unfortunately, in that moment, that's the opposite of what you can choose to do. I actually had to go into fact-finding mode. What's happening here? Is it still happening? How do we fix it? Is there anything dangerous occurring? Is there a problem for the tenant on the second level? I had to go get back in my car with this sewage soaked into my clothes and now soaking into my car and go get clothes and tools to find a way to try to fix this. It was the worst possible sort of dynamic. I couldn't just walk out of the situation at all. So we tried to figure out what happened to go to fix it. First, we try to snake the drain, which is the normal move, but it keeps backing up. And that's when we realized that the problem wasn't a blockage that you could just punch through. The pipe was essentially full of congealed grease. And the problem was that a snake just cuts through the hole in the middle of the grease, and then the grease closes back in, blocking the hole again. Now, you're probably wondering how this happened and how it was that we didn't catch it. We'll never know exactly for sure, but here's what I think happened. A number of problems compounded onto each other. The first problem was that when we renovated the house, everything was empty. So water wasn't running through the pipes normally, and there was no hot water. This allowed grease to sit in the pipes from the people that had lived there before we started working. And that grease, which normally would have been moved on by the normal flow of water to the main sewer line, was able to sit in the pipes and cool into a solid state. The second problem compounded the first, and that is that the 2 kitchens for the 2 units on a 2-inch vertical stack that went down into the ground and then ran horizontally across the ground about 20 feet until it connected with the main drain. So without getting too much into nuances of the plumbing, the point is that there was a very long horizontal section of pipe where this grease was able to sit, and once it had accumulated and get cold. So when we did our water test, yes, the water didn't seem to be backing up, but because there was such a big distance in these pipes before it got to the blockage, the water was basically filling in the pipes in that space. And that's why the system didn't fail right away. It took a week or so of continuous daily, everyday usage by the tenant on the second level. So we didn't use enough water during our water test to be similar to someone actually living there and using the water every day. So that's how we got to the situation where we can't even snake out this line, and we have someone living upstairs in a unit that we need to rent downstairs. So eventually what fixed it is a tool called a pipe bladder. It basically inflates to fill the whole diameter of the pipe, and then pushes the grease through until it gets through to the main drain. It does this instead of just poking a hole in the center of the grease. That was the only thing that actually cleared it. And if you haven't needed one of these yet, just file that away if you ever have a situation like this. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end of it because remember, we had a finished basement space. So now we had to cut out parts of our drywall, replace the flooring. It was LVP flooring, which is supposed to be waterproof, but because it got sewage all over it, we had to demo it anyway. After we cleared it, we redid the basement floor and tile because if this ever happens again, and I'm not saying it will, but if it does, I want to be able to mop it up and clean and walk away with less material damage. It was a lesson learned the hard way. But here's the thing I keep thinking about on this one, and this is the lesson I want you to take away from this story. There's a unique risk profile that comes when a property is partially occupied and partially vacant. An occupied house has more risk of repairs, but someone's there to report the repairs, so they only get but so bad. A vacant house doesn't have as much risk of repairs, but there's no one there to report the repairs. On their own, neither one is super risky, but together they create an extremely risky situation because the tenant in the occupied space can be creating a problem that's going unreported in the unoccupied space. A lot of people don't think about this, and I hadn't thought about it in the time. So the occupied unit creates the problem, the vacant unit hides it, and you find out when you come for a routine checkup. What I would do differently today is in this unique type of situation, I would put a Simply Safe water sensor in that basement. I don't use those in general, but I think for vacant properties, when I have partially occupied and partially vacant, I think this makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense to do a longer water test now in the future. So it's better to run the water for an hour or two. And by opening the clean out on the main drain, we can actually see if the water is running through to the main drain. Even with all of that, the one final takeaway is that as you scale your portfolio, you're going to run into risk profiles that you just didn't expect. You're going to end up in frustrating situations that you didn't plan for. And when you get to these, basically what separates those who make it from those that don't is how you react in those moments. You have to pivot to problem solving. You have to try to find a solution, even if you just want to go home and take a shower. You have to face these tough problems head on. And the way out is through. Hopefully, though, you can make your mistake on something different and not end up having to be on the floor laying in sewage like me.